All right, Johnny, you win. You did it successfully. You are the winner.
I don't know.
The timing worked out perfect.
I don't know.
Maybe it's because I had to join in guest mode. It's like that's the magic secret. Is like I actually need to have none of the powers.
No, that can't be it.
Maybe. Anyway, good afternoon, GitOpsians. We had a minor technical difficulties today, and I couldn't join in host mode and had to join in guest mode. So I'm technically my own guest today. It's amazing. Anyway, no announcements. I did see that the KubeCon schedule just went out. They announced accepted or denied CFPs and started releasing some schedule stuff. So that's pretty cool for KubeCon North America. And I know that there's going to be a GitOps related co-located event. I think it's ArgoCon again there. So that'll be fun for the folks that go in October. I'm not in that number. Enjoy Chicago for me. Let me see. What else? No other announcements.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't talk over.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Yeah, so Kube 128 dropped, I think it was last week, or it might have been a week before last. I can't remember. It might have been 2 weeks before. I don't remember.
Checking my email right now.
But yeah, there's a lot of good things coming out. So when OpenShift, I'm bringing that up because, like OpenShift is one release behind usually. So I think we'll see that in 4.15. And so then that kind of segues into 4.14 is going to be released in a couple of months. There's going to be some API deprecations and stuff like that. So make sure that you're keeping up with those so that way you don't get blindsided by something that you're not expecting.
All of that is very true. Yeah, I don't remember when the last I don't remember when the last release went out. I was scrolling through my email real quick to see if I could see the announcement, but I think I already archived it. So
yeah, it was recent. It was in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So
yep. Right. Well, so let's just get the show on the road because Gerald's sitting here waiting patiently for his turn. So Gerald Nunn joins us today. He is our colleague at Red Hat. I'll let him introduce himself a little bit more. But real quick first, what happened was he posted something interesting about GitOps on LinkedIn. I was like, that looks like an episode topic. And he was like, yeah, happy to do it. So I held him to his word. He was not allowed to just say that to be nice. He had to really follow through. Yeah, got him. Anyway, so so Gerald joins us today. Gerald, first of all, I actually don't even know where you're located. So where are you joining us from? What do you do? And then talk to us.
I'm in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. So on the West Coast.
Oh, you're like
north of Seattle.
California hat.
Yeah, exactly. California's hat, just like Canada's the U.S. hat, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So we get the same weather as Seattle, basically, if you're trying to think of in terms of climate and other things, which makes it one of the warmer spots in Canada during the winter, which is why I moved out here. So my role at Red Hat is I am the GitOps technical marketing manager. I'm essentially the new Christian Hernandez that took over in January after Christian left. God bless him. We miss him greatly, but things move on. And so I've been doing that role since January, and basically the role involves, helping Red Hatters internally use the GitOps product as well as help customers use OpenShift GitOps to accomplish their goals. So that's essentially what I do.
Fantastic. Yes, we miss Christian, except for I talk to him all the time. So sometimes I forget he's not here. Great. So talk to us about, if you wanted to frame up anything else about today's topic and demo or just hop straight into
so in OpenShift GitOps 1.9, we introduced Argo Rollouts as a tech preview feature. So if you're not familiar with rollouts, I got a few slides that we'll go through that kind of talk about rollouts, what it does, why you'd be interested in it, as well as some of the limitations with the tech preview, just to put people on that page. And then we'll talk about how to use rollouts in its current form and state in OpenShift without service mesh. So just going against normal OpenShift routes, how that works, what some of the limitations are, the ins and outs of that. And we'll do a bit of a demo after, and you get to see some new UI in the OpenShift console that I I've been POCing as well, both for GitOps and rollouts. So a bit of fun on that front, maybe. And
that's pretty shiny. I forget we have a UI. Right? I forget we have one. And I don't now that I'm in the OpenShift on Azure space, I really don't know what the UI stuff looks like, because it's a whole different even type of access than it was in the OpenShift on AWS things that I used to work on. So I forget that it's there. I'm excited to see what it looks like these days. I don't remember the last time I accessed it.
Really? Wow. Okay. I mean, the UI for me, coming from GitOps background, is really, it's not there to change things, but it is very useful for troubleshooting and navigating.
Yes.
It's also really useful for customers that are new to Kubernetes or OpenShift in general, because, going through a GUI, you get to see how things are done, and then you slowly migrate more to a pure manifest GitOps approach,
Yes.
right?
Aggressively that. Yes, it is so helpful. The UI is so helpful for learning the paradigm of Kubernetes. And we do a really good job actually on our UI of like bubbling up and aggregating the important logs from the various places. Like I think that sometimes gets a little underappreciated in the some of the rest of the noise that exists in the UI. But when I joined Red Hat and like first got here, like the folks I was working with were like, okay, here's how you do everything in the UI. And that really helped me adjust mentally to the paradigm. And then after that, it was like, okay, great. Now this is how you do all the things you're used to doing in the UI on the command line. And then that was just, like you said, it was a very natural progression to pure YAML and manifest and never looking at the UI again. But I don't think that it would have been as easy to mentally just like grok without that visual aid at first. It was a real, like, it's an accessibility piece. It really is.
Yeah, it gives you a picture, right? Like it helps you paint the picture of what your application looks like or what your deployment looks like if you have more than one application. And I think that like being able to see some of the dependencies, right? Like, oh, I've got a replica set that might not be spinning up a pod, or I've got a deployment that might not be spinning up a, you know what I mean? Like we can see all these things. And then if you go and you can tell the logs or follow the logs if you want to. I'm like the worst about using UIs. Like I always use the shell. Like I don't know why. I'm old school, I guess. Like I've been using Unix and Linux for so long that like I'm just more comfortable. But there's so much that you can pull out of the UI that's really helpful. And I think when you're talking about technical things to non-technical people, it's also a great way to help like tell the story about what's going on, and then it helps them kind of track and understand like, okay, this small thing that should only take 5 minutes, here's why it's taking a day, or here's why it takes an hour, or whatever.
Yeah. I especially like you kind of mentioned it earlier, but definitely that thing where like you look at the pods and you can see like what owns the pod, right? So if there's an operator, you can see that, okay, this pod is actually controlled by this operator over here, or it's controlled by this other thing over here. That's so helpful to when you're going through the debugging steps to figure out where certain behavior is coming from, to know kind of that hierarchy of ownership.
Yeah. Shameless plug. I'm sorry. I was going to say a shameless plug for Backstage, right? Or Janus IDP or Red Hat Developer Portal, right? Like it's that also gives you that ownership of the resources, right? So you'll have like, hey, here's all these things, and everything's owned by Gerald. So call Gerald if there's a problem. Yeah, that's how I'm going to label everything.
Call Gerald at 2 a.m.
Yes, I'm going to now make a custom RBAC role, and the role is going to be called Gerald, and it's going to control everything. Service account name Gerald.
Having done enough, midnight to 2 a.m. troubleshooting sessions in my day, it's like, okay, I'm done with that.
No, I'm calling you, man. Blaming you, calling you.
All right, so that's what I had on the agenda today. So let me try. We didn't really beforehand test the screen sharing. That's always an adventure. Let's see how that goes.
Oh yeah, we were so caught up in my stuff not working, we never got to the tech check.
Yeah, no worries. It looks like it's going to work. Can you see my screen all right?
Yep. So you are on your slides.
Yep. So then I'll just do the slideshow here, and you can still see them.
Yes.
All right. So we're just going to do a kind of because not everybody is necessarily going to be familiar with Argo Rollouts and what it's good for and why you should use it. I figured we'd just do a quick 5-slide overview of it and talk about it just to set the stage for the demonstration. So what is Argo Rollouts? So Argo Rollouts is really, it's a drop-in replacement for Kubernetes deployments, but with a lot more advanced capabilities around progressive delivery. So you think of a Kubernetes deployment, there's really two strategies in a deployment, replace and rollout. Argo Rollouts adds two more, Blue, Green, and Canary, which are common deployment strategies for deploying your application. And we'll see each of those in the subsequent slides. It can integrate with a variety of traffic management solutions. So if you deploy this against Service Mesh, for example, it can use Service Mesh to automatically shift traffic around depending on whether you're using Blue, Green, or Canary, and it will manage all of that for you automatically, right? So I remember back in the old days when I was doing Blue, Green by 2 data centers and managing the load balancer by hand, how painful that was. And this, I mean, that was literally, we would have a 6 to 8 hour maintenance window to do a deployment, right? And this is like literally doing all that work for me automatically, and I don't need to have the network team on call or managing the load balancer, right? It's awesome. And as I kind of alluded to there, it really just automates that whole process of that advanced deployment and rollback, and it includes an advanced analysis capability to help you test your rollout and make sure that as your canary is progressing or as you want to switch from blue to green, that what you deployed is actually working correctly. So that's really the why of Argo Rollouts. In terms of deployment strategies, so there's two that I mentioned, Blue, Green, and Canary. So Blue, Green, really, you have initial deployment, the blue one, let's say. Then you go ahead and you deploy a new version, which is the green one, but nobody's actually connecting to it from a user perspective. You test that out, you make sure it's good to go, and then you switch the load balancer over to use the green one. And then when you get to the end, you just blow away the blue one and you've only got the green one left, right? And then you can do another deployment. In that case, the new deployment might be the blue one. Canary is really more of an advanced version of Blue, Green. And the idea behind Canary is rather than just doing a sudden switch between the two versions, what I'm going to do is do a progressive switch. I'm going to step the number of users between each deployment. So again, I start with the blue one. That's my initial version. I deploy the green one. And in this case, I send 10% of the users there. And I'm like the canary in the coal mine, which always sounds a bit cruel, like likening this to the canary in the coal mine where they go down and make sure there's no bad gas or bad air and the canary dies. But in this case, you send 10% of the people there and you hope that doesn't die, this application, everything's good to go, and everything is good to go. You continue progressing to more and more users until you finally get to 100%. And once again, the older version, the blue version, goes away. And this is all managed automatically by rollouts. That's really the beauty of it. As I kind of alluded to earlier, trying to do all this manually with a load balancer and doing that yourself can be quite a painful experience. So that's really kind of the why of rollouts. A key feature in rollouts, though, for me really is the analysis templates. So what an analysis template allows you to do is integrate the rollout with a metric solution, right? Or a metric provider. So something like Prometheus, Datadog, a web metric provider, etc., that you can use to actually determine the status of the rollout. So for example, when I'm rolling out Canary and the 10% of the people are hitting it, I can use an analysis template to go, hey, is that 10% actually working or is it not working? And if it's not working, roll it back, right? We'll just go back to the blue one and I'll figure it out after the fact in terms of what went wrong with that, right? So you can define those failure and success conditions and what your limits are in terms of the number of failures, because more often than not, when you're dealing with real world applications, you're never going to get 100% success rate, right? There's always going to be little oddities and things that crop up, but you can control what that success rate or failure rate is for you. Is it 95% success, 98% success, 99% success, etc., and tailor that for your particular application. So when you're running a Canary analysis, there's a couple of different modes that you can run in: background and inline. Background runs while the rollout's progressing. Inline, it runs as a discrete step. And Canaries, as I mentioned earlier, it's all about the steps, right? And that's really where those templates can come into play. With the blue-green, the analysis template is basically run on a pre or post promotion. So pre-promotion, it can be really useful in blue-green to run as a test, i.e. nobody's hitting the green one yet, but I want to test it. I want to make sure that there's no problems with it before I switch my load balancer over. And then post is kind of a validation, right? Essentially, I've got users on it now. Let me just run this test for sanity check to make sure that everything's still okay. Another cool thing with analysis templates, and we'll see this in the demo, is that you can actually run a job as part of the analysis. So in the demo, I'm actually running Siege, Apache Siege, which can essentially place load on a web application to generate load so that the test will get meaningful results when we're actually running the rollout. Awesome. So that's a really high-level overview of rollouts. Now, in terms of how where we are with rollouts and OpenShift.
Can I ask you a quick question? I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm cutting you
yeah,
off. I
absolutely.
don't
Go
want you
ahead.
to get too far away.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you have blue-green, right? Like the thing to remember too is that you're going to have two instances of that application running simultaneously, right? I think even with the Canary, you're going to have that. So just keep that in mind when you're doing if you're in a resource constrained environment, that could potentially be an issue. So Canary might be the best option. If you're blue-green, you're just going to have two instances of that running until you decide to promote it. And if you don't want to use the metrics or anything like that, like you could go old school and just say roll it back, or cancel that rollout, and it'll stick with the blue or the green, whichever one is your current target. So that way you don't push something out that's like super, crazy bad, and if you're not using the metrics integration. Sorry, I just wanted to make the point and
No,
then ask the question and stuff like that before you get too far ahead.
no, that's a great point. The fact that, you do have to plan for the additional resources that this deployment strategy takes, because in a traditional deployment rollout, the number of pods that you're surging at any given point in time is relatively minimal. Whereas in a blue-green, it's like two complete parallel stacks, right? Whereas, as you alluded to also with Canary, it's more kind of a slow step up, step down. So it's easier to manage the resources, or if you have less resources, to go with a Canary deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it also sort of depends, I will say, a little bit on how ephemeral your environment is or can be. So, for example, when we're looking at the managed OpenShift fleets, we don't create or destroy anything when we upgrade those. But we still do it in, there is a Canary, which is essentially becomes what they call a sector, right? You have various sectors. And so you have your Canary sector. And then after that, that finishes, has some sort of, we usually call it a burn-in period, which is the period of time the new release version runs. Then we'll start progressing out to other sectors based on like risk analysis is actually something that we do. So not to say that you guys aren't exactly correct in terms of, this practice and application can create additional load, at least temporarily, but it does not necessarily have to.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a little bit of a practice thing, a sectorization thing. The other thing I wanted to mention when you're doing this and you're trying to figure out like what percentage should I set for the advancement, right? There's usually some standard practices like you do in 10%, 15%, 25%, like something like that, right? And continue to iterate up. You might want to look at the size of your fleet or the size of the things and determine what level of risk really comes with this. And then so you can kind of try to, basically you're going to try to create a manageable level of incidents, because exactly what Gerald said, you're going to have like 90% of it be fine and 10% is going to be a mess. And that might still be enough to continue to progress your rollout depending on scale or what have you. But somebody has to action the thing that failed. So as you're planning through, all these things and what metrics and how much at a time and what's the acceptable failure rate that will still allow us to progress to the next phase of our rollout, you need to kind of think about that and keep that in mind. And again, I'm looking at this from a perspective of a managed platform, and a managed application or just an application that's not managed, you're going to have like very different considerations.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing, as Johnny pointed out as well, is that with rollouts, while this can all be automated and you can go from 0 to 100 from completely automated, if you want to put a pause at 10%, for example, and have a human look at things, you can absolutely do that as well, right? So you can get a little more manual intervention if it's needed.
Yeah, it's cheap CI/CD, right? That's we were talking about it a little bit in the pre-show, Gerald. It gives you a chance to put gates in and go and check things out, and then like, okay, let's bump it up to let's add a little bit more. Let's add a little bit more. And Tal made a comment in chat. It said in blue-green you want to do network mirroring to load the new version with the current traffic to see how it behaves before the release. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's definitely that's one blue-green strategy. It depends on what you're trying to get out of your blue-green exactly. So for example, you might do blue-green on only UI, where everything else is the same. You have no real considerations on the server side pieces or real significant risk. You might do blue-green where you split the traffic because you want to see if you result in better conversions, right? So it depends on sometimes a blue-green or progressive rollouts may actually be driven not by a technical case but by a business case.
Yeah, well, it also depends on whether your blue-green is talking to the same stateful backend. You can't mirror the traffic if they're both talking to the same database. That's just going to lead to problems, yes. Right? So generally the blue-green I'm referring to from an application perspective, they're all connected to the same production stateful backends. So mirroring becomes a little more problematic, I think, in those scenarios. But always interested in hearing what I know Tal, so interesting to see what he has to say and if he wants to comment further on it.
Yeah, I've seen so many different approaches, and some of it also depends on like your architecture. Are you super microservice driven, or are you a monolith?
Yeah, that's a good point too.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yes. Wow.
I mean, people run monoliths on Kubernetes all the time. It's very.
There's nothing wrong with a monolith, in my
Yeah,
opinion. Nothing wrong with a monolith. Not everything needs to be a microservice.
No, I agree with that. Not everything needs to be a microservice. It's so counterintuitive, but it also completely works.
Yep, absolutely. Even the monoliths nowadays are skinnier than the monoliths of yore that are running on job application servers, right? So
so it is really still so different. I mean, if life would have been better if they were more more like they are today back then. We'll put it that way.
Cool. Okay, so the in terms of the limitations with the current tech preview, so traffic management from a service mesh works 100%, no problem at all. And blue-green on OpenShift route will work fine because it's simply doing switching of the services for the route's connected to, so there's no problem with that as well. But Canary is essentially working on a best effort perspective. It does not do active traffic management with an OpenShift route at the moment. That's a gap that we want to close before we go GA with the product. What it means by best effort, and we'll see this in the demos, essentially what it'll do is it'll scale pods, right? So if you have a stable and a canary, and the canary is at 10%, and let's say your pod pool is 10, the canary might get 2 pods, the stable will get 8. The next step, the canary gets 4, the stable gets 6, and so on, right? And it'll sort of do an artificial canary based on that. And that was really what the LinkedIn post was highlighting, that it actually worked surprisingly well when I tested it out, at least for my relatively stateless application that I was testing at that point. So in terms of traffic management, that's the limitations there. And then the other limitations that I wanted to mention here is that we're only supporting namespace scope for rollouts at this time, rather than cluster scope. That means every namespace that you want to use the rollouts in needs to have its own rollout controller in there. That's actually a good thing in some way, because trying to manage the multi-tenant security with a global operator is somewhat more involved. So there's some benefits to that. And then the other one that I wanted to highlight is that for better or worse, the upstream rollouts does not support authentication against Prometheus. And unfortunately for rollouts, but good as a practice in OpenShift, we require authentication to interact with the Prometheus or Thanos in an OpenShift cluster. Now you can use the web metric provider as a workaround for that, which essentially goes against any kind of web URL, and Prometheus and Thanos at the end of the day are just a REST API that you can make a web call against. But it is a little more convoluted and involved to do that versus just using the Prometheus metric out of the box. And again, this is something that will be addressed before we go GA with Argo Rollouts in OpenShift GitOps. So those are the key points that I just wanted to highlight, and that's it for slides. Any other questions on this, Johnny or Hillary, before I move on?
When this is one of my favorite topics, so I'm going to try not to bogart all of your time by me asking a bunch of silly questions because I'm excited. But like I know it's tech preview now. When, I don't know if you can even say, when will it go GA?
I don't have a date for it. So our product manager is working on coming up with a calendar of a bunch of the current tech preview features in terms of when we're planning on GAing them, but don't think she's released that as of yet. So I'd have to get back to you on that one.
Okay.
But if I was evil, I would commit to a date and tell Harriet that's the date.
Yeah. Oh, sorry about that. I made it public.
No, I'm just joking, because at SA I used to joke about how the product manager used to say when SAs would make commitments about dates, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
On their behalf.
It's one of those things where we just send her flowers, coffee, chocolates, whatever her favorite thing is, and be like, "Ooh, sorry."
Yeah, exactly.
Our bad. Nobody watches this show anyway. It'll be fine.
Yeah, so unfortunately, there's no date at this time. There are a number of things that we need to close from an enterprise perspective in rollouts before we can GA it, and some of them are mentioned here. There's a few others that I haven't talked about. So it's really where our focus is going to be in the next few months to try to close those gaps.
Yeah, I was thinking with this, requiring the authentication, right? It's one of the things I always tell people is OpenShift is opinionated Kubernetes, and its opinions are all security. Like 90% of them are security.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's absolutely a good thing. It's just unfortunate that it is what it is right now. But anyways, so that's it for my slides. Johnny, you got any more questions?
Just about the namespace scope. So like when you deploy the operator, the OpenShift GitOps operator, you deploy a rollout. So that's each time I want to deploy a rollout, I would have to, if I have like 8 namespaces, I would have to deploy that resource, that rollout resource, or rollout controller.
Rollout
Excuse me.
manager. Yeah, the rollout manager resource in each of those 8 namespaces.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Is
Now,
there like any labeling or anything like that? I'm sorry.
Pardon me?
My bad. Do you have to like annotate a namespace or label a
No,
namespace?
it's just a CR, a custom resource. And
Okay.
the nice thing with rollouts, it's a very lightweight controller. It's not like OpenShift GitOps or ArgoCD where there's like 5 different pods that need to run in order to do something. It's just like one pod, right? So it's not really, from my perspective, a big deal to do that.
Gotcha. Awesome. That's it for now. I'll come up with more. I have a ton. So
yeah, no worries. So we do you want to get in the demo?
Heck yeah, we do.
Okay. So hopefully this still works.
Best time to find out is live. I was literally just thinking today, like every now and again when our demos break, we end up being not GitOps Guide to the Galaxy, but the GitOps Guide to Debugging. And I was like, maybe we should do an episode about that, GitOps Guide to Debugging.
one thing like on Ask an OpenShift admin, that I feel like that's something that goes really well. Or it comes across really well because a lot of people are interested, like, how do I fix this when it breaks? You know what I mean? And when you do a cooking show demo and you're like, hey, look, it just works. You're welcome. Right? They don't get to see all the sausage being made, right? So they don't get to see all the pain and the typos and stuff like that. So it's good when you get to debug live because it's like, oh, well, here's the error that you're going to see when you type your password incorrect 6 times, Johnny. Like, this is just going to happen.
It's going to happen.
So for the demo, I've got 4 namespaces that will be focused on. CI/CD, I've got a pipeline that will run. A dev namespace where the application's deployed, just a regular deployment, no rollout. A GitOps namespace, because this is all being managed by ArgoCD. And then the prod namespace where the rollout is actually running the rollouts. So you can see here, Johnny, in the GitOps operator, if you go to the demo prod namespace, there's a rollout manager here called Argo Rollout. We can go look at that YAML. And you can see it's a nothing burger YAML, right? It's super easy to deploy, ignoring all the cruft that Kubernetes likes to add on to any resource. But spec wise, there's really nothing there, right? It's more of a marker to get the controller to deploy it. So it's really easy to get up and running in terms of the controller, and then the pods will work from there. So from a demo perspective, there's a couple of different options, as I mentioned, for UI. So the Argo UI that's out of the box. Can you guys see this all right? I'm still showing my screen. Okay.
Yep.
So this is the Argo UI out of the box. And if I go, if I go here, yeah, you can see I've got 2 rollouts, a blue, green, and a canary rollout. And it gives you a bunch of different information. Like the canary, for example, you can see the different steps that I've got set up in that canary, etc. And you can generally do everything you want in this UI. But this UI, as you can tell up here, is running locally. Right? This is not a UI that's deployed in OpenShift. There is an extension available for ArgoCD, but I believe at the current moment in OpenShift GitOps, we don't have a way to put extensions, like for customers to put their own extensions or third-party extensions into that ArgoCD instance. So running it locally is kind of the option there. Now, for me, I like the console and I like things to be integrated, so I'm not popping back and forth between different things. So in the console, I also have a UI for this, which is very experimental in POC.
It'd be amazing.
And you can see I've got 2 rollouts here, blue, green, and canary that we saw earlier. And the idea really here is they both get updated with the same image. You'll both see them go at the same time. But it's really so that when I'm doing this demo, people that I'm doing the demo for can compare and contrast blue, green, and canary and how they work, right, at the same time. So from a CI perspective, I'm going to go ahead and kick this process off after all that explanation. But any questions? Yeah, that's basically what I need to cover. Oh, maybe I should go in this a bit more down here first. So if you go down here and you see the blue-green, for example, it gives you some basic information about the rollout. But you can see down here all the different revisions that have happened. And you can see that my stable and my active services are pointing to the same revision, i.e. this is all progressed and everything's good to go. And it's the same with the canary. If I go look at the canary, We can see the revisions here, and you can see my stable and canary are pointing to the same revision. From a service perspective, nothing's progressing, nothing's happening right now. So this is kind of what it looks like when it's all stable at this point. So right now, if I go look at the applications deployed from a route perspective, you can see I've got different routes here for the active and preview for blue green, and then I've got different routes for canary and stable. I also have a canary all. So what the canary all does is it selects all pods for the canary and is essentially providing the view that a user hitting the application would see. So if I have 10% canary, 90% stable, you will see that in this canary all. Whereas if I hit canary or stable, I would see either just the stable or just the canary. It'll be easier when I do the demo and you can actually see it running. But from an application perspective, it's the standard Rollouts demo app. You get these colored squares. When you deploy a new version of the application, we'll deploy it with the green. You'll see the green colored squares pop up here instead of the blue ones as we go through it. So that's just kind of a quick run through of what we're going to see as we go through it. So I'm going to kick off the pipeline. If there's no questions or things you want to ask about.
Yep, I have one real quick.
Okay.
It's more of a statement, and see if you want to expand on it. Like a rollout itself, like the rollout resource, it's not spec compatible, but it's essentially it's a deployment, a Kubernetes deployment, right? So that way, like it looks and feels very much like a regular Kubernetes deployment that you'd use for Nginx or whatever, right? It's just now you're using the Argo API with a rollout kind.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. So you can see you got replicas, you got selector. The strategy is obviously replacing the deployment strategy. But if you go down here, you get the pod template, exactly the same as the pod template for deployment, right? So that's really why I kind of highlighted as being a drop-in replacement for deployment. Yes, there are some differences between the two in terms of the spec, but conceptually, it's essentially the same. And spec-wise, a lot of it is identical between the two.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. To the point where I haven't tried it out and my UI won't support it. But in this template, instead of specifying the template here, you can actually go say, use that template over there from a replica set or from a deployment. And
that's cool.
You can just reference it. It is cool, but I don't know if I would actually when I would actually use that. But,
no, that's good. That's real good. Storing a reference to something. Ooh, that's nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah, but it's important to understand, though, it's not using the deployment to manage the rollout. Like the rollout will still do its own rollout, to have its own pods, its own replica sets, but it's just sucking in that template from the deployment. So that's why I say I don't know, like, when would I have a deployment deployed in parallel that I want to suck in that template from? What's the use case for that? But if I could see maybe if you're migrating from one to the other where it could be useful. But yeah, anyways. Neither here nor there. If somebody on the call or on the session has an idea or can outline what a good deployment case is or a good use case for that is, feel free to chip in on the comments.
So sorry, Hillary, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, as long as you think, yeah, you're onto something with the migrations or something like that there. It might be really useful for if you don't necessarily own the thing that you want to roll out, right? So if somebody else owns it, it's somebody else's like an open source project or whatever, and they have a deployment for it, but you want to go through a rollout strategy with it, then you could just pop that in, and then you don't have to. You can continue to use whatever their stuff is, and not try to maintain your own version of their thing the same way.
Yeah, that could be a possibility where you set their deployment to 0 and you go with a rollout instead, but it points to their deployment so that if they change it down the road, you just continue to hoover it in. Yeah, that could make sense.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that there's cases for that, especially if you're in situations where you might not necessarily, like it might be a dependency of yours where you don't truly own it.
Yep. Yeah, that could be. Okay. So I'm going to kick off the pipeline here just to get this going. And thanks for keeping me on track there, Johnny. That was a good point about the deployments.
Yeah, if you get a chance, it looks like Tal wants to see what's under the GitOps menu. I don't remember which screen you were on where that GitOps menu existed.
We can that's part of my experimental UI. You'll see a little bit of it as I go through the demo, but we can talk about it at the end if you want. I don't mind showing it a bit more.
Oh, I see. It's right under workloads. I was blind as a bat there.
So I have an experiment where I'm trying to do the the interface for GitOps in the OpenShift console instead of the ArgoCD console. So then there's pros and cons to that approach. And like I said, it's a whole separate subject that we could spend 20 minutes on, no problem. So let's table it to the end. If there's time, I'm happy to show it and talk about it. You'll see a little bit of it though as I go through the demo. Cool. All right, so I'm going to kick off this pipeline here. So currently we're on blue as we saw. So I'm just going to change this to green. And I just got to set the volume here for the manifests.
I appreciate the mechanical keyboard in the background.
Oh,
one of us.
I need to work on my mic more apparently, because I've got a nice directional mic now. Particularly because I have a mechanical keyboard and it was too loud for the mic I was using before. Anyways, this kicks off a simple pipeline that will deploy the application into the dev environment and then the prod environment. It basically just does a update of the Git repo in dev and then has Argo do a sync of it. And it'll do the same thing in prod. We just need to wait 2 seconds for it to finish. But it's a pretty standard, CI/CD process running against ArgoCD in a non-gated type CI/CD process. Okay, so now we've done that deployment. If I go back to rollouts and go back to the right namespace. So now we can see I've got my rollouts things are happening here. The canary one's in a pause state and the blue-green is progressing. So we go look at blue-green, you can see that I've got my analysis run running here. And you can see that there's a preview now on the newest revision. So the preview service is going against that. And the stable active revision is still the revision 20. You can see this thing here that's churning. This is the analysis run that's running. And so in the analysis run, there are 2 things that are running. One is it's checking the metrics against Prometheus to make sure that my route is not returning anything other than 200s for my OpenShift route, that is. So it's going against OpenShift's monitoring stack and saying, hey, for this particular route, tell me if you've got any 400s, 500s, etc. And if you don't, it's all 200s. That's great. It passed. And you can see it's doing different tests here. And there's actually 4 tests and they pop in as they happen. The other one that's running is, let's see, does this highlight? Oh, let me go up here. There we go. It's a job that's running and I'm running Apache Siege to generate load against this application. Now, when you actually open this application, it is a RESTful application that makes API calls against its backend. So it will generate its own load, but I kind of wanted to have the Siege thing running because I wanted to go, well, if I'm running an application that doesn't generate its own load, which is most applications, how can I do that, right? And I want to test that out. So that's why I've got Siege running in a container to do that and that. So once all the analysis runs are done and it's passed, you see I've got another bug here because if I do this again, oh, actually I only ran 3, sorry. You can see that the analysis run passed and now I can look at these and I can see the preview stable. And if we go look at the routes back here, and we look at active, you can see the active is still green, but if you go look at preview, or sorry, it's still blue, but you look at preview, it's green, right? So now we got no user traffic actually going to this because all the user traffic is going to stable. But what we can do is actually do the promotion at this point in time. So I go back to rollouts and we do a promotion on that one. So you can see it's progressing again. And you can see now that there's a post-analysis phase that's happening. But the active service is now the blue service, right? So that's what people are going to be seeing when they start hitting this. And it'll progress. And then once it finishes the post-testing here, another 3 runs, this stable will move back up there and will be all blue from a blue-green perspective. So this is how the blue-green is actually working in terms of, enabling users to quickly and easily run those parallel stacks of infrastructure and have be able to manage that more effectively. If for some reason there was a problem, you can actually do a rollback on this, and I'll show this a bit later because I've got to turn off ArgoCD in order to do the rollback. Otherwise, I'm, fighting with Argo to try to get it to go against Git, which is never a good thing to do. But doing the rollback is pretty quick and easily. The other nice thing I've got in the UI here is you can see what image is deployed with each revision. So here you can see it's the green image, and down here you can see it's the blue image, right? Just by hovering the mouse over it. And if the rollout had more than one container, you'd see more of these boxes with the different container names, and you can hover over them to see them. So you can see now this is all done. So the next one to look at is then Canary. So we go look at our Canary here. We can see that we've got the old revision, which is stable, and the new revision, which is Canary. And similarly, if I go look at my routes again, if we do the stable, we can see we're blue. I'm going to start turning some of these off because I've got too many of these things going. If we go to Canary, we can see we've got the green. But if we go to all, you can see we got the mix, right? Mostly blue, but some percentage of green. I can't remember what percentage I'm actually using here. But you can really see the effect of the Canary, right, in action with this application in terms of the different colored squares that are appearing depending on which back end is being hit. And Hillary, this is where I kind of grabbed the screenshot, right? This graph down here showing you the split between the blue and the green services. So the reason why the Canary isn't progressing, if I go back to my rollouts, and we go look at the YAML, is I've got a step here that's just a pure pause, right? So I've got 20% traffic going to Canary, and I've just got this pause. So in order to move past this pause, I actually need to do the promotion. So go back here, go on Canary, do the promote. And so now it'll start pushing it out, and you'll see that it's going to kind of bounce between pause and progressing. And that's because each of those steps, there's a slight 20 or 30-second pause I've got in each of those steps to kind of give the system time to accommodate and get used to things. And as it's going through things, you can see that the green squares will start becoming more and more versus the blue squares, right? Until finally it's just 100% green squares running at that point in time. Yeah, it always, for some reason, even though there's no traffic interruption, it kind of blacks out here if you don't have the app visible. But anyways, you can see here how it's progressing, right? So eventually we'll get to 100% Canary and nothing happening on blue. Yep, there we go. So that is kind of just quickly showing the blue green and and the Canary and how they work together, or not work together, but the difference between the two in terms of the style of deployment that you're doing, right? And the Canary is really nice in terms of being able, like we said, risk management, being able to step up the change that you're making and exposing only a small percentage of your community to it, so that if there's a problem, or if you're doing something that's particularly risky in terms of a new feature or a new technology change, you can kind of manage that more effectively than a full-blown, we're just going to do a hard cut to the new version. So I'll pause there. Johnny, Hillary, any questions so far?
Tal is asking if you could zoom in. So I'm assuming he's referring to the rollout, like when you're going and looking, like at the specs for the rollout.
Yeah,
zoom in.
Yeah, no problem. There you go.
I was going to ask, do you have this demo stuff up in a repo somewhere that we could share?
Of course I do.
Yeah, that's the one.
Right there.
Perfect. We just drop that into.
Do you need me to paste this anywhere, Hillary?
Put it in there's a little private chat at the bottom of our streaming thing. There you go.
Let me make this bigger. Sorry, it was on my other monitor.
Yeah, I understand. There you go. Boom. And then Johnny can take that and copy and paste it into the chat. Yeah. I would ordinarily do this, but I am just decorative today.
But yeah, you're a guest. Yeah, so just to re-show the YAML and the steps, because that's probably what Tal was referring to in terms of zooming in. So you can see the steps here, right, where the first step is just set the weight to 20. There's no pause, nothing. But then there's a pause step after. And we're saying, okay, hard pause here. Don't do anything until somebody promotes this. And then you can see as we set the weight to higher numbers and increments, we're doing slight pauses at each step just to kind of give things a chance to, what's the word, bake. When you're kind of making changes like this, sometimes you just want things to kind of settle out a bit and give it more time. Now, for the purpose of the demo, I set these short because no customer wants to sit on a call for an hour while you wait for this to go through a progression over an hour period, right? In the real world, you're going to set those pause steps a lot longer than I've got them here.
Mm-hmm. And all this, everything that you're doing, right? Like it doesn't have to be done in the UI. You can do it from the console. You can use OC, or you can actually use kubectl.
Yeah, so there's a Rollouts plugin. You can do like OC. No, I gotta remember.
That's it.
There you go.
Yep.
Yeah. So it has commands for promoting,
Make
restarting,
that bigger.
undo, etc. Right?
Can you zoom in? Yeah.
I could zoom in, but my keyboard doesn't seem to be letting me do it. Interesting. Hang on a second. I only wrote this terminal emulator. Let's just make the font bigger. Where did I put the font in this thing? It's one of those things where I don't play around enough with this anymore. Am I going? I'm going blind to my old age here.
I didn't see it either.
Advanced, no. General. Appearance. Nope. Okay, sorry, I'm pooch. I can't remember where I stuck this thing. I don't change the font that often on my my terminal anymore. Oh, there it is. Got it. I wrote this like 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah, there we go.
Awesome.
So now you can see a little better. Promote, undo. And it's just it's a normal kubectl plugin, right? So you just copy the command into a directory with kubectl, or it's not on kubectl. Sorry, not with kubectl, but is on the path, and then it'll just show up automatically when you do OC or kubectl.
Awesome. And when it's rolling out, you can actually check the status of the rollout, right? You can see it progressing and stuff like that. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. You can do all that through here.
I think Christian has shown this before, some time ago.
Yeah, he did a demo with the service mesh at one point, I know.
That sounds like him. I don't even remember. Between all the things, sometimes I don't even remember what we've done on this show. I'm like, if I don't remember it, it means it wasn't recent enough for anybody to care. We'll do it again.
Yeah. So on the analysis run, just to show that a bit as well. So remember when I said that the I have to use the web metric instead of the
yes,
Prometheus metric? Well, one of the side effects of that is you need to URL encode the parameters that you're sending with the web metric, right? You can't just have a nice kind of, here's my Prometheus query, copy it right out of the metrics tab in the OpenShift console, paste it right in. You got to do this little extra step of URL encoding it. And the other side effect of that is that in terms of getting the data out, in terms of the success condition and reading it, there's a little more effort because you're getting a JSON body back, and you've got to kind of figure out, okay, what does that JSON body look like? And where do I pull that metric out of the response, right? So I've got a bit of things in here where you can see I'm doing that. So that's kind of, a little bit of additional effort over the Prometheus one, but the benefit is it allows you to use that authentication. And then down here, you can see where I'm running Siege as a job.
Mm-hmm. I'm just sitting there thinking through if there's any like more elegant ways of doing that. I don't think there's very good options.
Yeah, not really that I can think of.
So Tal asked, when a rollout is happening, is ArgoCD syncing that application?
No, but ArgoCD is aware of the deployment. So if you want to see that, let's go back here. We'll do one more rollout here. Go back to pipelines. We'll just run another pipeline again. What color would you like, Johnny or Hillary? You got a preference?
Yellow.
Yellow. Okay, that works for me. We can't do gray because is it Canadian gray or American gray?
I always spell it with an E. Apparently that's not the American way, I guess. I don't know.
And to be honest, now that I think about it, I don't know which way is the American or Canadian British way. It's, G-R-E-Y or G-R-A-Y, right?
I don't know.
I thought it was EY.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea, actually. This is one of those things, like, I don't understand how this deviation occurred, at least with the lack of U after O's in American spellings. At least I know, the history of that one, right? But I don't know how we got that deviation. That one's bizarre to me.
So you can see it's progressing, and then we're just going to wait for it to get into the pause here. But okay, there's one that's paused. So if you go look at here, I'll show a bit of the GitOps thing here. We'll go look at our applications under GitOps. So you can see my applications are here, and the prod one. Go look at that, and the resources. So you can see that the Canary resource is suspended. So Argo understands the state of the rollout in terms of what that pause really means, and that's why it's showing suspended here. And this is all done through ArgoCD health checks, right? So I think you both are familiar with ArgoCD health checks. That you write a little bit of Lua code and check whatever resources you want in terms of its health status. So there's out of the box health statuses for rollouts, and it will know that if that is in a pause state, that it will return a suspended status to ArgoCD. Right. And if that rollout fails, it'll get a degraded status as well when you go to deploy it. So you can actually see it interacting with ArgoCD in terms of the statuses that the rollout has as it's going through this process.
That's awesome. Yeah, the other thing I was going to say too about that is like in the actual Argo console, you can pause or suspend or roll back or promote the actual test, right? Like the Canary or the blue green. So it's pretty neat. Like there's a little button inside that you can click on that and say, all right, yep, I'm good to go. I want the. Oh, you're gonna do it. Yes. Here it is. It's gonna be amazing.
Well, now I gotta find it.
Yeah, Johnny's level of excitement over the ArgoCD UI is unparalleled to anything we've ever seen before on the show.
I'm not even a UI person, but this one, I really do like this UI. I think it's pretty neat, and it's basic, right? There's nothing really to it, but it does enough.
Well, sometimes less is more.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say it's funny though, as somebody that's writing a UI for this, it's like I look at their UI and it's like amazing how much it does actually when you start drilling into it with all the different options and things that are under the hood that need to happen to present these views, right? So, but yeah, here's the different options you're referring to, Johnny, right? So you can abort it, you can promote it full, you can restart it, resume it, etc. So those are all available as well, and you can see the status here is suspended, just like I showed you in the other UI that I was working on.
That's awesome. And the reason why I brought that up too, right, is because if you give somebody through RBAC like access to this, right, and say, hey, look, you can manage your applications, you can manage your rollouts and stuff like that, they can do all of it, but you don't want them maybe to have cluster access, right? You only want them to have Argo access. You can give them Argo access, give them the rights to their applications and stuff like that, and then they can still do all the magic that they need to do without having to log in directly to OpenShift, if that was something that you were worried about.
Yeah, absolutely. The extension, if we supported extensions at OpenShift GitOps, there would be like a rollouts extension here as well, where you can get that rollouts interface in the ArgoCD application. So that would give you more capabilities there as well.
That's nice.
Okay, let me go back here. I go back to the rollouts. Now I've got to progress it just to do the rollback. Let's progress both. Promote. So this will start going through, and the blue-green, one of them will hopefully finish relatively quickly, and then we'll do a rollback. But to do the rollback, as I mentioned, I've got to turn off Argo, so we'll just do that really quickly here. Turn off the automated sync policy down there so that we can actually make that rollback change. And if I go back to the rollouts, let's see if it's done. Not quite yet. This is the problem when you try to pick an analysis run and it takes too long for a demo. Yeah, it's like, come on. Oh, one more left. And then I got to wait for the job to finish. I tried to finish the job. In theory, I could do a rollback while it's running the analysis run, but for a clean demo, typically I try to avoid doing that. Oh, there we go. So this one that's stable is yellow now. Actually, just go have a look at that real quick. Routes, active. Yep, so it's yellow. If I go back, go back here to the rollouts. And we just do a rollback on I was doing on blue-green. And we go back to the green one. So I'll do a rollback on that. So you can see what it's really doing is just doing a roll forward. So it'll go through the same analysis template perspective, and it'll roll that out as the new version. And again, this will take a few minutes to go through, but you can see how straightforward and simple it is to do a rollback, just like it is for deployments, right? It follows the exact same methodology and process. So if you're familiar with rollbacks and deployments, you'll be familiar with them in Argo Rollouts as well.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
No, I don't think so. I think we're coming up. We're about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so we're kind of like hitting that exact perfect wind down time.
Yeah.
Okay. So from a GitOps product perspective, we're very interested in feedback on rollouts and what people are looking for in terms of additional capabilities and features, closing gaps from an enterprise perspective, because there's always things that customers need that may not necessarily be aware of at first blush, right? So if there are folks that are listening to this that are interested in trying it out, by all means, please try it out, and do please feed us, your feedback in terms of things you're looking for, because we're definitely interested in hearing more about how to do things. And one of the things we're interested in is UI. What do you want to see for UI? Should it be in the Argo UI? Should it be in the OpenShift console? Should it be in the Red Hat Developer Hub? There's lots of different places where it could end up, right? And with limited people in engineering to do this work and lots of different priorities floating around, it's really great to get that feedback to understand where we should prioritize.
100%.
Yeah,
So what's the best way for people to send feedback? Are we just adding Red Hat on the platform formerly known as Twitter, or what are we doing?
Yeah, no. If you're a customer, open a support case and just provide feedback through that, and that will get funneled to the product manager. Alternatively, you can reach out to myself directly. I never mind hearing from customers, or you can reach out to the product manager, Harriet Lawrence, directly as well. But I won't post her email address here. But as a starting entry point, support case is great, or your account team, right? So if you have an account team, you have a solution architect that works with you day in, day out, they're a great person to talk to provide feedback to, and they will funnel it to us as well.
And then, of course, your beloved hosts were always happy to accept requests for routing. So if you can't remember who you're supposed to talk to, you can reach out to me on the usual platforms, and I'll tell you who to go harass.
Trying to find all the buttons.
Yeah, there's the buttons.
All right, and then here's Gerald's stuff with his email. Sorry, Gerald. I'm sorry.
No, no worries. It's all good. Yes.
Okay. Well, that brings us exactly to top of the hour. Unfortunately, I have a hard stop, so I'm going to make Johnny end the stream pretty quickly here. Gerald, thank you again so much for coming on, especially because you would get it kind of late notice. So very, very much appreciated. We value you. And as for everybody else, Johnny and I still have to talk and figure out if we're streaming next week or if we're just doing a new cadence. We'll post updates in the usual platforms, and we'll see you next time. And until then, choose your technical debt wisely. Bye-bye.